Okay. So Peter Merrill is with Quest Management, and he will be delivering on quality for tomorrow this evening, synergy of innovation management with quality management systems. He is a keynote speaker on innovation and has keynoted at conferences in cities including Dubai, Mumbai, and Shanghai. He began his career in R&D in a major UK corporation, and later as chief executive of the leading design brand. In that corporation, he led innovation in one of the most demanding markets. He is one of North America's foremost authorities on management systems, which he has implemented in such innovative companies as IBM, AIG, and RIM. Peter is a founding chair of the ASQ Innovation Division and is an incoming member of the ASQ Board of Directors. Congratulations, Peter. He's a project lead for the new ISO 56011 standard on innovation management. He's the author of Innovation Generation, Innovation Never Stops, and his most recent book, ISO 56000, Building Innovation into Your QMS. And he also writes on innovation for quality progress. Then we'll briefly cover his abstract. This evening, he's going to talk, as I mentioned, about innovation management and quality management. Actually, let's just go into Peter's discussion this evening. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Peter Merrill, who is our speaker this evening. And Peter, are you able to share your screen? Perfect. Welcome.
Okay, so you're seeing full screen, I hope?
Yes, it is on full screen.
All right, so good evening, everyone. Good evening for a second time to some of you. I'm going to take you back to start with a little over 10 years ago, when the ASQ Innovation Division was just getting off the ground. And a few of us, a few of the founders of the division, were speaking at the QMD conference in, it was actually in Orlando. And that evening we were having dinner together, and we were talking about how innovation integrated with, or innovation management integrated with quality management. And in the conversation, this term, quality for tomorrow, came out. And it's something that stuck with the division since then, because innovation management and quality management are not different. They very much overlap. And that's what I'm going to show you tonight, the synergy of quality management and innovation management. So, this is the presenter's nightmare when you are presenting virtually, screen freeze. So here we are. Why has innovation become so important? And it's really because of the rapid change the world is going through. And we innovate in order to respond to change. Change creates new needs all the time. And that's where the innovator comes in. Quality management focuses very much on today's customer. We make sure that we deliver what our customer wants. The focus of innovation management is finding the unmet needs of today's customer, and quality management does that to a certain extent, but also finding out the needs of tomorrow's customer, who's a customer that we don't even know yet. We don't know who they are. And I'm going to show you that innovation management is a very natural evolution from quality management. And it's really over the last 15, 20 years that innovation management has got increasing attention. If you look at the history of quality, before the 1980s, back in the 1970s, everybody talked about quality control. And then as you got into the late 80s and early 90s, people realized that you don't achieve a quality product or service by inspecting things. You did it by quality assurance and preventing things from going wrong. But then in the 90s, as we got into system thinking, we realized that quality was everybody's job and the whole organization had to focus on it. And so post 2000, as people started to think more into the future, that's when innovation management became a natural evolution from quality management. Innovators look for new opportunities, but that creates new risk. And risk is a big part of the world of the innovator. Evaluating risk, mitigating risk, dealing with uncertainty. A lot of people think that because innovation has come to the fore in the last 15 or 20 years, that it's something new, but it's actually not. It's been around for a long time. And the first recorded reference to innovation was by Machiavelli, of all people, in his book, The Prince. And I'm sure some of you have probably read that book at some time in the past. It's the sort of thing you read when you're at college. Well, Machiavelli had some very chilling words to say about innovation. He said, those who innovate will get very little support from those who will benefit, and will get downright opposition from those who will not benefit. So the innovator's world is a tough world, that I can promise you. So innovation is not new. It's really the results of innovation, what we're producing, that's new. And the body of knowledge of innovation is not especially new. And that's where people get things wrong. We're learning stuff that's been there for a while. If you look back at quality back in the 90s, people spent a lot of time working out how to define quality. You don't hear it so much these days. Back then, you heard the terms like fitness for purpose, fitness for use, which were what Deming and Duran used. And then Crosby, he defined quality as conformance to requirements. In other words, keeping your promise to the customer. And if you read the ISO 9001 standard, those three words keep appearing, conformance to requirements. And so quality is about keeping our promise to the customer. I mentioned before in the Meet the Speaker session that many people think innovation is about new technology. And yeah, sure, technology often provides solutions, but it's only part of the story. And so we need to develop our understanding of what innovation is and where it operates. You know, we tend to think of innovation of products and services. In other words, the offering that our company makes, coming up with new offerings that the competition can't produce. In the world of quality, we tend to think of process innovation. In fact, some people think of innovation as being a subset of continual improvement. I remember speaking at a conference in Helsinki, the European Organization for Quality, and Professor Kano was there, and he was speaking. He said, there's no such thing as innovation. There's only breakthrough improvement. I thought, oh, come on, wake up. Talk to 1,000 CEOs about that, and they tell you you're out of, you just don't get it. A lot of people are in denial about innovation. Kano was one of them. The biggest area of innovation, though, is business models, and many people don't realize that. A classic example of business model innovation is, of course, Amazon. They started out as a bookseller, a very simple bookseller. They're now a huge retailer. they're a platform for retailers. They made very big losses in those early years, and people are now critical of the profits they're making. But it took them a lot of guts to get through those first 5, 7, 8 years when they were successively making losses. But they had a vision. They knew where they wanted to be going. So innovation is looking at tomorrow's customer. What does tomorrow's customer want? Or what does today's customer want tomorrow? You can think of it as quality for tomorrow. What the successful innovator does is they find an unmet need, and that creates an opportunity. And again, just to prove that innovation is not new, it was Plato over 2,000 years ago who said, necessity is the mother of invention. Okay, he said invention and not innovation, but his meaning was the same. It's a need out there that's not been met. We find that need, and then we find new information, we develop new knowledge, and we produce creative solutions. You'll find, as with quality, a lot of different definitions out there. The ISO definition of innovation, I'm not wild about. I find it a bit dry. It's a new entity that creates value. It doesn't really ring with me, that. The one I really like is what I heard at a conference in Ryder, 5 or 6 years ago now. And the speaker after me at that conference was from GE. He said, my definition of innovation is something new that makes people happy. I love that because there's an emotional component to innovation. You know, you see it and you say, oh, that's cool. Oh, I love that. And that's what a good innovator will do. They'll make people happy. So there's a major human component. There's a major emotional aspect. A year or so back, there was a great article in Harvard Business Review. It was called The New Science of Customer Emotion, and how you need to recognize that you've got to create emotion in your customer. And, you know, people like innovation because it's fun. Generating new ideas and creating new benefits is very fulfilling for us. You get a sense of personal fulfillment. It's exciting. And we have that natural human desire to create, which unfortunately, much of our work has taken away from us. A lot of people think creativity is sort of magic. It's something that drops out of the sky. But actually, it's not an accident. Successful innovators have a clear strategy and they have a clear process. And let me show you quickly now what the innovation process looks like. And I'm going to come back to this in more detail a little later. It starts off finding opportunity, that unmet need out there in the marketplace. That's then followed by finding ideas, alternative solutions to the opportunity. And that's where we see that, you know, the creative stuff, the idea creation or ideation as we call it. And that's the fun stuff. But even that follows a process. And then where people often go wrong when they do that ideation work, finding concept solutions, is they let themselves be driven by emotion. What we really need is data on time, cost, risk for the various alternative solutions. We analyze that data and then we narrow down to what is our preferred solution. We may pick 2 or 3 and we develop a working solution. This is the hard work here. This is the blood, sweat and tears, making a working solution. And this is where you work closely with the customer. Certainly with the business I ran in the UK, I was chief executive of a leading brand there. we always had a chosen customer that we were going to work with when we were developing a new solution. We would test it in the marketplace, we would refine it, and then we would go live, we would deploy. I prefer the word deliver. The word deploy is what the ISO standard uses. So that last phase, that develop and deliver phase, is what Edison called the 99% perspiration. His quote was, "Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration." It's the hard work. You make the new solution work and then deliver it. And that's what quality management is all about. The second half of the innovation process overlaps completely with quality management. And if you go back to the 80s and 90s, Deming, Duran, and Crosby, they all started to see that system thinking was becoming essential for quality to succeed. I mentioned already that a lot of people think that innovation is magic, but good innovators follow a system approach. And the same is true of innovation. Innovation must integrate with quality management and requires system thinking. If you're going to be a serial innovator and you're always feeding new ideas into the hopper, that gives you longevity in the business. Now, this is a bit of a busy slide. It's one that I've just recently put together. I was talking to a group of auditors recently about the new 56,000 standard. And I was wanting to show them how innovation management differs from quality management. All ISO management system standards have these blue clauses as part of the standard. They're the platform or basis for a management system. So every ISO management system that you look at, whether it's quality, environment, information security, health and safety, all have those blue clauses. The writers of the standard then have the opportunity to add their own clauses. If you look at ISO 9001, all the additional clauses that they have added in are in operations, in what's called Operation Clause 8 of the standard. If you look at 56,001, the additional clauses are almost entirely in the strategy area, in the earlier clauses. So my message here is that innovation is much more strategic than quality management. And so the two fit together very nicely. They give us forward thinking as well as present day thinking. And of course, what is common in both is you need leadership. Leaders need to ensure this linkage of innovation management and quality management. Quality management is the platform from which innovation delivers. It requires leadership commitment, and an innovation leader must especially understand that transition from the creative phase to the more, I'll call it traditional, the more structured execution phase of quality management. Innovation management becomes much more controlled in its later stages. And in those delivery stages, time and speed are the key drivers. I always say to people, if you've come up with a great idea, I can pretty much guarantee someone else has seen that opportunity and has probably got an equally good idea to solve that opportunity. So be ready to run for the line. That is so important. So there is a lot of navigation as you go through the innovation journey, and that's very much the job of the leader, to keep the workforce on track, keep them motivated, keep them enthused. So a leader's behavior becomes mission critical. We talk a lot about culture, and a lot of leaders don't realize that unconsciously they create the culture of their organization by their own behaviors. A lot of research says that culture is actually created during crisis. It's how a leader responds when there's a critical situation that establishes the culture. And good leaders will demand challenges to their own ideas. And good leaders will not overlook middle managers. Middle managers have a critical role in creating culture because they're the interface between the innovation strategy and the doing work, the development and the execution phases. You know, a lot of people in the world of quality tend to ignore culture. And I had the privilege of working with Phil Crosby for about 5 years, and he placed enormous emphasis on culture. And the way he developed culture, a quality culture in organizations, was through his quality education system. And what we used to do is we used to train the supervisors in a company, and then the supervisors would train the people. And that way they took ownership of the culture. So a classic quality culture is different from a creative culture. A classic quality culture reduces process variation, it increases process efficiency, it delivers very predictable results. And so quality emphasizes process stability and predictability. We follow the rules. Creativity, on the other hand, requires a lot of flexibility. And the behaviors in the creative phase of innovation are exploration, searching for new opportunities, collaboration, working with people who've got different experiences from us, who think differently from us, and that can often be challenging. Importantly, challenging the status quo, saying this isn't necessarily the best way of doing things, and being willing to experiment, and if we fail, learning from failure. You don't celebrate failure, you celebrate the learning that comes from failure. So leaders have a critical role in developing culture. They need to show their commitment to innovation. You've heard that 1,000 times in the world of quality. And innovation is now just in the same kind of position as the early days of quality management. And so leadership involvement becomes critical. They have to be able to allow that loose and open creativity, encourage that challenging of the status quo, and allow risk and uncertainty during the creative work. Now, in order to enable these two sets of behaviors to coexist, we have to start thinking about the structure of the organization. It's obviously not easy for creativity and execution to coexist. So structure has to allow this, and there are many different ways of allowing it through structure. Another of the challenges is that creative people are different from execution people, and they don't always mix together. So leaders have a job in ensuring those different sets of behaviors work well together. What we find is that generally for a creative organization, we need a flatter or networked organization. There are different ways of achieving this. We can spin off the creative organization. I'm not a fan of that because you limit your communications. You can subcontract your creative stuff. And again, I'm not a fan of that. The approach which has generally been found one of the best is self-managed teams, and that's not new to the world of quality. It was something developed by W.L. Gore, the people who made Gore-Tex, way back in the 1950s. And W.L. Gore is still a thriving organization and an incredibly innovative organization. Something to be conscious of, though, in this organization structure is that strong leadership is a key issue. And so we manage risks, we're continuously learning, and we're continuously improving. And those sound very familiar terms. Yes, they are, because they are core in both quality and innovation systems. So the other thing that I mentioned a little while back is that innovation is more strategic. It looks more into the future. And this word strategy, it does get overused. People use it very easily without knowing what it's about. It actually derives from the Greek word strategia, or translated, it means the art of the general. And there's a great quote from Sun Tzu: "No battle plan ever survives first contact with the enemy." And that's true when you're innovating. You're going to be changing your strategy on a continuous basis. You're going to create a strategic plan, but it's under conditions of uncertainty. And as you reduce that uncertainty, your plan will change. Now, for the world of innovation, you've got to be aligned with the core strategy of your business. If you're a startup, that's not an issue. But if you're part of a larger organization, there needs to be alignment with the core strategy. And as I mentioned earlier in this slide, strategy changes as you gain new knowledge. So I've taken you through the concept stuff. Now let me show you some of the nuts and bolts of innovation. We start innovation or start strategy with a tool that you're probably familiar with, the SWOT analysis. But we use it a little differently in the two worlds, the world of quality and the world of innovation. The SWOT analysis was originally developed at Stanfield, and it was because people were finding that strategic planning wasn't working. And it's not that complicated. It looks at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that the competition is creating for us. In other words, it looks at the marketplace, and it looks at our perception of what's going on in the marketplace. Strengths means, what are we good at? What are our unique competencies? What are the skills we've got that other people maybe don't have as well? What are the resources we've got that are unique to us? And then weaknesses asks, where do we do a poor job? Where is the competition beating us? Opportunities ask, what could be leveraged for value? And threats ask, where is the competition attacking you? Generally speaking, strengths and weaknesses tend to be internal. Opportunities and threats are typically external. But let me give you another perspective on this. Weaknesses and threats tend to be where the quality professional focuses, and we say, okay, we're going to mitigate the risk on these weaknesses and on these threats. Whereas the innovator tends to focus on the opportunity and also looks at the company's strengths where they match up with the opportunity. So this tool of the SWOT analysis will look the same in both worlds, but it will be used differently in the world of quality and in the world of innovation. But there's another tool that I want to draw your attention to, which is the pestle analysis. You might be wondering, who's this guy on the right? It's Aristotle, the great thinker. Pestle requires a lot of careful thought, and it may require somebody to do the work for us market research work. It looks at the political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental trends. Larger companies will definitely be doing a pestle analysis. And this, as you can see, has a much wider scope than a SWOT analysis. It needs a lot more knowledge. What you do find is that in the world of innovation, social trends are a major driver. And looking carefully at social trends is what good innovators do. Not necessarily technological trends, although they are a factor. New technology will solve the needs, but it also creates new needs. And you'll have seen that from your own experience. So pestle requires a lot more research than SWOT, and it may require us to engage external experts to do that analysis. Out of that, we find what are the risks. And this is the same for both quality management and innovation management. What are the biggest risks? And by calculating risk, we're taking the second step in transforming an opportunity into a potential solution. But there's another factor here, and that's often called the ambition level of the company. How willing are leaders to take risks? And that depends very much on the industry you're in. You'll find technology companies will take much higher risks. There's a concept you may have come across, which I do not like very much. It's called the minimum viable product. And anybody who bought Windows Vista will know what I mean. It's a nightmare for the customer. It's only because Microsoft have a virtual monopoly that they survived the disaster of Windows Vista. And they still put out new platforms that are not fully proven. While technology industries take high risk, food and pharmaceuticals necessarily take low risks. So it depends what industry you're in, the level of risk that you're willing to take. And there's another aspect as well. How much failure are we willing to accept? And Intel, for example, say that if they're not having 10 failures for every success, they're not taking enough risk. My God, that is a very high risk level. The tool we use in the world of innovation is different. The risk analysis is done differently from the world of quality. In quality, we use failure mode and effect analysis, and you're probably all very familiar with that. That's because we're looking at the present, the current situation. We're looking at what's going on in our today processes. Innovators are looking to the future. So innovators use a different tool, the VUCA tool. VUCA means volatility. So we're looking at opportunity. What's the volatility? Volatility means liability to change rapidly. Uncertainty. What do we not know about this opportunity? Complexity. How complicated is it? Ambiguity. How differently can we interpret this? So this takes a rather different perspective. And where it's similar to FMEA is that, remember, risk is a multiplier. And so the highest scores represent the highest uncertainty. And the bigger challenges require more mitigation. This is what a VUCA risk analysis looks like. And this is from a company that's looking at a new offering. And they're asking these 5 questions. Do we have the technical ability? What's the size of the market? Are there limiting regulations? Will manufacturers accept the idea? Do they need to get some form of accreditation? These are their strategic issues. And you'll see on this risk analysis, manufacturer acceptance has come out as the highest risk. So they've got some serious market research they need to do about this new offering. Back to the process that I talked about. I showed you this slide a little earlier, and I took you through what the innovation process looks like very quickly, from opportunity, finding the opportunity, to finding concept solution and collecting data, analyzing data, narrowing down to a preferred solution, developing that into a working solution, and then delivering the solution. Opportunities first. This is where we find those things that customers may not even realize they need, where we look for trends. And I mentioned earlier a technique called ethnographic research. It's a bit like Gemba, where you go out on the shop floor and watch what's happening. Ethnographic research is where you go out in the marketplace and find out what's happening. That's where you find your opportunities. Great example, a great success story in ethnographic research is with Lego. 20 years ago, they were in deep trouble. They sent out ethnographers, there's a mouthful, into the marketplace to watch kids playing. They had a big revelation. When kids play with their toys, they're talking to their toys. They're telling stories. You know this from watching your own kids. And they realized that storytelling was a big part of play. If you look at the Lego offerings now, they're all wrapped around stories. They totally changed their business as a result of that research. They found the unmet need. Out of your research, you define the opportunity. That's where people often go wrong. They don't define it. It's the number one step in problem solving. Define the problem. And we prioritize which is the best opportunity for us. Then we get into the concept work. This is the fun stuff, the brainstorming, the ideation, where we generate alternative solution. This is where diversity is so important. And what I mean is diversity of experience, diversity of knowledge, people that are willing to challenge. Once we've generated the alternatives, we collect data and we then feed it into the analysis. The analysis is where we evaluate the feasibility of the concept. We find out which are the critical uncertainties and we mitigate them. And we go researching for new knowledge to reduce uncertainty. Then we develop the concept into a working solution, but also we're thinking about how do we deliver this solution? You probably need a completely new delivery model. Then we deliver. We make the solution available. We put it out with a value proposition. We monitor and we get feedback. And we continuously improve the solution with that feedback in order to stay ahead of the competition. This second phase, validation, development, and delivery, is where speed matters. Time is of the essence, as lawyers say. So there's a popular misconception that there's no innovation process. I've just shown you that the initial steps of finding opportunity require a high degree of freedom. We operate with divergent thinking. And that's different from traditional process thinking. The later stages The delivery stages are very much like quality management, where we want low process variation, where we operate with convergent thinking. And when you look at the ISO 56001 standard, which is coming out in 2024, that's the auditable innovation management standard. It actually integrates with 9001, and even the clause numbers 8.3 are the same. One other thing that people often overlook with innovation is the need for measurement. This is where integration with quality management becomes quite easy. Where we need to focus, though, is on the inputs to the process and the system, not the outputs. Too often you hear metrics quoted which are after the fact, number of new products less than 3 years old. Well, that's not going to drive your innovation process. What you need to know is, are you getting the resources you need? Have people got the competences you need? You collect data, you analyze it, you're constantly driving towards results, and you're adjusting the process to improve the outcomes. You measure innovation management just as you do quality management. And there's a credo I heard some years ago, data and information and knowledge. Knowledge is the fuel of innovation. And that comes from, first of all, analysis of data. That's how we get information. Knowledge is information we can act on. And innovation management and quality management are very much in the same boat when we come to measurement. So let me summarize what I've taken you through this evening. I've thrown quite a lot at you. What I've shown you is that quality management and innovation management have a lot of synergy. In the innovation division, we call innovation quality for tomorrow. You've seen how leadership is vital. It's not something you do out on the periphery. A key job for leadership is to integrate creativity and delivery. I've shown you the differences in culture. I've shown you that innovation applies a strategic perspective to a management system. And I've taken you into the innovation process and the metrics we use to drive the process. One last thing is, if you want to know more about this, my book on ISO 56000 is published by ASQ Quality Press, and you can find that either by going to the Quality Press webpage or going to our own company webpage as well. So thank you very much. I have been coughing a bit in the latter part of the presentation, so excuse me for that, and I'll hand back. Thank you again. Thank you. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation this evening. It was very insightful and interesting, and I'm sure everybody learned a lot. At this point, does anybody have any questions for Peter regarding any of the information that he's discussed in the presentation this evening, or information in his books, or his career in general? Well, I'll get us started. I had one. Peter, you had talked a little bit about how social trends are major drivers of unmet needs. Can you give us an example of social trends that create innovative opportunities?
Yeah, and it's actually from very personal experience. I mentioned to some of the people I was talking to before the presentation that although my background is in chemical engineering, I spent some of my life in the world of fashion and fashion design. But I also had the job of leading a major brand, a design brand in the UK. And at the time, and this is going back a while now, at the time that Charles and Diana got married, the simple thing of Diana's wedding dress had an enormous impact on social trends in the UK. There was a huge, shall we say, movement towards, I'm trying to find the right word for it. Nostalgia is really the word. And we saw it emerging in all aspects of design. The couple who designed her wedding dress were David and Elizabeth Emanuel, and that was a dress. But we saw all the aspects of that lace trim and design spread right across all aspects of design in the country. Now, that probably didn't happen in North America, but it certainly within that environment of the UK was a major social trend that occurred. Now, fast forward to the present day, and we see the social trends that are emerging as a result of technology. We see the trends that have occurred over the last 2 years as a result of the pandemic. The pandemic has created a major social trend and a major business trend, in fact, towards virtual communication.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Does anyone else have questions for Peter this evening?
Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. I've enjoyed being here. And if anybody has follow-up questions, my email address is at the bottom of the page here. So I'll stop screen sharing now, shall I?
Oh, please. Yes, thank you so much.
Okay.
And I will go back to the presentation briefly. Okay, just to wrap up the last few slides of this evening. Meeting evaluation surveys will be available in the next few days in your email. Please complete these surveys so that we can gain a better understanding of how to best serve you and your needs as an ASQ member. And as I mentioned earlier, our member satisfaction had dipped last month in regards to our networking opportunities. If you could send us an email or send me an email, I provided that in the chat, regarding ideas you have surrounding networking and how you would like to see that improve, it would be much appreciated. There are some upcoming programs that we have scheduled for you all in the next few months. On August 11th, we have Anshuman Tiwari, who will be presenting on quality challenges. On September 8th, we have Gary Ying, I hope I pronounced that correctly, who will be presenting on root cause analysis. October 13th, we have Roger Ritterbeck, who is going to be presenting on changes to aerospace. November 10th, we have Katie Benio, who is speaking on turning soft savings into hard money. And finally, this year, wrapping us up on December 8th is Stephen Bonacorsi, who will be talking about results that stick. I hope that you all will register for those program opportunities as well. They're sure to be very informative. And then we have opportunities to engage on social media with our section as well. You can catch us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And prior to wrapping up our presentation for this evening, does anyone have any final thoughts, comments, or questions for any of the topics or presentation this evening? Topics discussed or presentation this evening? All right. Well, that concludes the program meeting for July. I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. I really appreciate it. And I just want to extend one last thank you to Peter, who is our guest speaker for this evening. Your topic was very informative. Thank you so very much. And we hope you feel better and get some rest in your part of the world.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.